It started like any other November 1st. I woke up groggy with the faint aftertaste of stale Halloween candy in my mouth and a dull headache from staying up too late binging horror movies. The decorations from the party last night were still hanging, fake cobwebs in the corners, plastic bats swaying slightly from the ceiling, and the flickering jack-o'-lantern on the porch, its candle long burned out. There was an eerie quiet outside, the kind that presses against your ears and makes you feel like you're in the eye of a storm. I was scrolling mindlessly through my phone when I saw the first post. It was from the local news station. Breaking. Graves found dug up at Oakwood Cemetery. Investigators on the scene. My heart stopped for a second. Oakwood Cemetery was just a 10-minute walk from my house. I'd been there plenty of times, mostly for Halloween pranks and dares, but never for anything serious. I stared at the headline, my brain refusing to process it. Every grave? Dug up? I had to see it for myself. I threw on a jacket and left the house. As I approached the cemetery, I saw a small crowd gathered near the entrance. Cops were there too, but their usual bored expressions were gone, now replaced with something I could only describe as unease. They were whispering to each other, their hands resting on their holsters like they were expecting something to jump out at them. The iron gates creaked as I slipped through, joining the growing number of onlookers. That's when I saw it, the scene that would haunt me forever. Every single grave had been disturbed. Rows and rows of dirt mounds, each grave violently clawed open as though something had erupted from below. The headstones lay toppled, cracked, or buried in the displaced earth. You could smell the stench of overturned soil and something else, something rotting. It wasn't like the graves had been dug out neatly. No, it looked more like something had clawed its way out, desperately, violently. The coffins, if you could even call them that anymore, were splintered. Some were completely shattered, leaving gaping holes where the dead had been laid to rest. Except the dead weren't there anymore. I overheard snippets of conversation from the crowd. There's no bodies, not a single one. Can't be a prank. It's too massive. What the hell could do something like this? That was the question, wasn't it? What could do something like this? There were no tire tracks, no sign of heavy equipment being used, just dozens of graves torn apart like they'd been attacked by wild animals, or something worse. A woman next to me was sobbing softly, her face pale. I heard her whispering to herself, something about her husband's grave being one of the empty ones. My stomach twisted. I pushed forward, weaving through the crowd until I was at the edge of the nearest grave. The dirt was still fresh, damp from the morning dew. I hesitated, then crouched down and reached out to touch it, feeling the cool earth beneath my fingers. That's when I saw a footprint, not a human one. This thing was massive, 3 toes, with long, sharp claw marks digging into the dirt. My heart thudded in my chest, my mind racing with possibilities. What had been in the ground last night, and what had it become? The police started pushing people back, trying to get control of the situation. I backed away, but my mind was buzzing. This wasn't just some prank. This was something else. Something weirder than I could even begin to explain. I couldn't shake the image of those shredded coffins, those missing bodies, and that footprint. I knew I had to go home, but something made me stay a while longer. That's when I spotted Old Man Harlan, the cemetery groundskeeper, standing off to the side, smoking a cigarette with trembling hands. He was staring at the graves, but not like he was shocked, more like he was expecting it. I approached him, my voice barely above a whisper. "Harlan, what happened here?" He didn't look at me, just took another shaky drag of his cigarette. "They always come back," he muttered, his voice gravelly. "Every year after Halloween." I blinked, my skin crawling. "What do you mean?" "People think the dead just lie there waiting for time to forget them," he said, his eyes fixed on the empty graves. "But some of them ain't done with this world. Not yet." My blood ran cold. "Are you saying this has happened before?" He finally turned to look at me, and his eyes, those haunted, hollow eyes, made my breath catch. "Every year. But it's never been this bad. Never this many." I took a step back, my mind racing. This had happened before? Why didn't anyone know? Why didn't anyone say anything? Before I could ask more, Harlan flicked his cigarette to the ground and started walking away, muttering to himself about the restless dead and unfinished business. I watched him disappear down the road, my heart racing. I didn't sleep that night. How could I? My mind kept playing back the scene at the cemetery, the empty graves, the claw marks, and that footprint. What had been buried there, and where were they now? What had woken them up? I tried to distract myself, flipping through the channels on TV, but nothing could quiet the fear gnawing at my insides. Every creak of the house made me jump. Every gust of wind outside sounded like someone was trying to get in. It wasn't until around 2 a.m. that I heard something. A howl. Not the kind of howl you'd hear from a dog or even a wolf. This was something deeper, more primal. It echoed through the night, choking me with fear. I sat up in bed, my heart racing, and then I heard scratching, soft at first, but growing louder. It was coming from outside. My hands were shaking as I crept to the window. Holding my breath, I slowly peeked through the curtains. There, standing at the edge of my yard, was a figure. I couldn't make out much in the darkness, but its shape was weird. It was hunched over, the limbs were too long and too thin. And its eyes glowed yellow. It's like the only light you could see in the dark. It turned its head, sniffing the air, and then slowly started moving toward my house. I backed away from the window, my whole body shaking. My mind screamed at me to run, to hide, but my body wouldn't move. I was frozen with fear. The scratching grew louder. They weren't just gone from the graves. They were coming back. For us. It's been a few hours since then. The howling hasn't stopped, and I can hear them outside. More of them. Scratching at the walls, at the windows. They're not resting anymore. I don't know how much longer I have or what they want. But if you're hearing this, if you're out there, lock your doors. Stay inside. Because whatever was buried in those graves isn't staying dead this time. And I think they want us to join them,